What if the entire world stopped farming animals tomorrow? One day the farms are running like they always have. Chickens in crowded sheds, cows grazing in pastures, ships hauling frozen meat across oceans. And then, the next day, it all stops. No meat, no dairy, no eggs. Not a slow change. Just an instant break from the system that shaped our diets and our economies for thousands of years. It would feel unreal at first, like a rumour that couldn't possibly be true. But the signs would show up quickly. You'd walk into a grocery store and notice an empty aisle. Then another. The meat section would be bare. The cheese shelves would be empty. No milk, no yogurt, no butter. The egg case would be clean and cold with nothing on it. At first people would assume more trucks were coming, that this was temporary. But when the delivery trucks didn't arrive, panic would rise. Restaurants would rewrite menus on the spot. Some would just close their doors rather than try to adapt in a day. School cafeterias would scramble to figure out lunches. Families that rely on animal products to feed several people at an affordable price would feel the pressure right away. And the farmers, the ranchers, the truck drivers, the feed mill workers, the people who spent their entire lives tied to animal agriculture. They'd wake up to a world where their expertise no longer had a place. For many, the loss wouldn't just be financial, it would be personal. A part of identity, routine, and community would be gone. This is where the world would start to ask a very big and uncomfortable question. What do we eat now? Plant-based foods would rise sharply in demand. Beans, lentils, peas, nuts and grains would become the core of daily meals for billions of people. But even though these foods can provide enough protein, the system to produce and distribute them at this scale isn't ready overnight. Prices would climb fast. Countries would compete for crops, and the world would feel a little unsteady. But while the human world is adjusting in chaos, something else is happening quietly, far away from grocery stores and city streets. The land begins to change. Right now, a huge amount of the land we use on Earth is dedicated to raising animals. Fields for grazing, fields for growing crops to feed those animals. If animal farming disappears, that land loses its purpose instantly. On day 1, it looks the same. On day 10, weeds start to rise. On day 100, shrubs and baby trees appear along fence lines. Rivers begin to run clearer. Grass grows taller than it has in decades, and then nature starts to reclaim. And this doesn't happen cleanly or evenly. Some areas turn wild fast, some areas struggle. Some regions would see rapid overgrowth and even become fire-prone at first. But over years, then decades, ecosystems would return. Forests would spread again in many places. Grasslands would rebuild their root systems and become deep carbon stores. Wetlands would expand and filter water. And greenhouse gas emissions would change too. Animal farming produces a large amount of methane, which warms the planet quickly. If it ended, methane levels would start to fall almost right away because methane doesn't stay in the atmosphere for long. This wouldn't solve climate change, but it would slow the rate of warming in a noticeable way. And slowing warming buys time. Time to adapt, time to rethink, time to heal. Freshwater use would drop as well. Raising livestock and growing feed crops uses a huge share of our water. Without that pressure, aquifers could start to refill. Rivers could stretch further. Some drought-prone regions might slowly become more stable. But while nature heals, people have to figure out how to nourish themselves in a new way. And that's where the next challenge begins. Removing animal products overnight creates nutritional gaps. Protein isn't the hard part. Plants can provide plenty. The harder nutrients are vitamin B12, iron, calcium, and omega-3s. Wealthier countries would move quickly to fortify foods and distribute supplements. But many regions don't have nutrition infrastructure like that. In places where animal foods are key to preventing malnutrition, health problems would rise quickly. Children and older adults would be most vulnerable. Doctors and public health workers would have to respond on 2 fronts, treating nutrient deficiencies in some regions and managing over-reliance on processed plant alternatives in others. Because while some people would turn to whole plant foods, others would grab the new replacement products flooding the market. And many of those would be salty, sugary, or heavily processed. So the world might see both undernutrition and new forms of overnutrition at the same time. Meanwhile, the economic ripple effects would spread. Animal agriculture is one of the largest industries in the world. It involves farmers, feed growers, transport companies, veterinarians, slaughterhouses, grocery stores, restaurants, clothing brands that use leather, and research labs that develop medicines from animal products. That entire network would collapse overnight. Countries that rely on livestock exports would face deep recessions. Rural communities could lose their economic foundation entirely. So governments would need to act fast. Job training programs, land use transition funding, incentives to grow new crops. Some farmers would shift to growing legumes, grains, vegetables, or fruit. Others might work on restoring land and managing rewilding zones. Landscapes don't return to the wild on their own. They need guidance, protection, and patience. At the same time, new industries would grow quickly. Lab-grown meat companies would scale production, offering meat that comes from cells instead of animals. The taste would be familiar, and that alone would draw many people in. Vertical farms would become more common in cities. These farms grow food in stacked layers using very little land and controlled climate. Protein from algae and fungi would expand too, since they can be produced with minimal land and water. So even while one massive system is collapsing, others are rising. There's disruption, but also growth. Now let's move forward in time, 10 years, 20, 50. The fields that once grew feed crops are now covered in forests, prairies, wetlands, or new food crops. Animals that once had nowhere to go begin to return. Wolves, foxes, bison, wild horses, birds, insects, and pollinators expand into new territory. Some regions would feel more alive than they have in centuries. Human culture changes too. Meals look different. New food traditions form. Old traditions evolve rather than disappear. People cook with more plants. Children grow up learning about how food affects the planet. Cooking becomes less about habit and more about choice. But there's something deeper happening underneath all of this. Humanity begins to reflect on what it means to live among other living beings, not above them. Ending animal farming would force us to confront our relationship with nature. For thousands of years, humans have shaped the world based on what we needed. This shift would show us how deeply the world has shaped us back. Some people would call the change an act of compassion. Others would call it a loss. The truth would sit somewhere in the middle. Because this isn't just about animals or food or climate. It's about connection. It's about how we feed ourselves, how we value land, how we care for each other, how we choose to shape the future. What happens if we stop farming animals isn't just a question of survival. It's a question of identity. And the answer isn't simple. It's complicated, difficult, and full of trade-offs. There would be real challenges, real pain, real work to do, but also real possibility. And because the world we know isn't fixed, it's built. And if it's built, it can change. The real story here isn't about losing something. It's about asking what we might grow in its place. What do you think would happen if we stopped farming animals tomorrow? Comment your thoughts down below, and don't forget to like and subscribe while you're there.